I didn't take the job because I wanted it. I took it because I needed something that would accept me quickly. That's the part people usually skip when they tell stories like this. They imagine curiosity as the starting point. For me, it was rent. My lease had ended, my savings were thin, and I had already burned through 2 interviews that month for jobs I wasn't qualified for. The logistics hub at the coast didn't ask many questions. That was the selling point. They needed bodies more than they needed experience. The facility itself sat near the edge of the port district, where container ships lined up like stacked steel islands waiting for inspection. From a distance, it looked like a single building. Up close, it was a network of warehouses stitched together over decades. Different architectural styles, depending on the era of expansion. Corrugated steel next to reinforced concrete. Old brick sections still standing between modern automated loading bays. Inside, everything moved. Always. Conveyor systems ran continuously through the entire structure, carrying parcels from intake to sorting to dispatch in an endless mechanical rhythm. It was loud in a controlled way. Not chaotic. Purposeful. That was the first impression I had. Order on a massive scale. My position was entry-level data verification. I sat at a terminal checking shipping discrepancies flagged by automated scanners. Most of it was boring. Incorrect weight entries. Duplicate labels. Misread barcodes. The system was old in some places, over-automated in others, and constantly compensating for its own inconsistencies. Training lasted 3 days. On the final morning, HR gave each of us a small folded sheet of paper. No explanation, no context, just a single sentence printed in plain black font. Do not acknowledge package 0 under any circumstances. I remember reading it twice, then looking around the room. Nobody else reacted. That was the strange part. Not that the warning existed, but that it was delivered like it was normal. Like it was part of payroll paperwork or tax documentation. I asked the trainer what it meant. She didn't look up from her clipboard. That's not relevant to your department. That was the first pattern I noticed. Not avoidance. Precision avoidance. A very specific refusal to elaborate. When I pressed further, she repeated the same sentence, word for word, as if it had been rehearsed. That's not relevant to your department. No variation. No emotion. Just closure. I kept the paper. Most people didn't. Some threw it away before leaving the building. I folded mine and put it in my wallet. A week into the job, I started seeing inconsistencies. Small ones at first. A shipment would appear in the system as received, but the physical bay number it was assigned to would be empty. When I asked about it, my supervisor told me the system sometimes pre-allocates space for incoming cargo that gets rerouted. That sounded reasonable, except the tracking logs didn't show rerouting. They showed disappearance. Not delays, not redirection, absence. A container marked as arriving at 2:14 would simply stop existing in the system at 2:15. No error code, no status change, just removal. I started keeping my own notes again, a habit I thought I had learned to avoid. But this felt different from the earlier job, more structured, less ambiguous. I wrote down container IDs, bay numbers, timestamps, everything I could cross-check later. After 2 weeks, I noticed something worse than missing shipments. Repeated absence patterns. Certain identifiers never resolved. Ever. Not delayed. Not rerouted. Just perpetually marked as pending arrival, even after weeks had passed. When I escalated it, IT told me those entries were system artifacts. Ghost logs, they called them. Temporary indexing errors that would resolve during overnight reconciliation cycles. They didn't. I checked every morning. Same entries. Same status. Always waiting. Never arriving. That's when I first saw it. Not directly. Indirectly. It happened during a late shift around 3:40 a.m. I was reviewing a batch of mismatched inventory logs when a container ID appeared on my screen that I didn't recognize. It wasn't flagged. It wasn't part of my assigned queue. It just appeared. No origin marker. No source batch. Just a label and a destination bay. 0. That was the bay number. 0. I thought it was a glitch. We didn't even have a bay 0. Floor numbering started at 1. I checked the facility map. Nothing. No designation. No physical reference. But the system insisted it existed. And more importantly, the system treated it like a priority routing point. I tried to trace it. Every attempt to pull metadata returned a blank response. Not an error, blank, as if the request had been answered by something that refused to acknowledge the question existed. The next morning, I asked a senior technician about Bay Zero. He didn't answer immediately. He looked at my screen for a long time, long enough that it became uncomfortable. Then he said something I didn't expect. "Don't say that out loud. Not, we don't use that. Not, that doesn't exist. Just that. Don't say that out loud." And then he closed my ticket without explanation. That night, I noticed something else. My access logs had been altered. The search I made for Bay Zero was gone. Not marked restricted, not flagged, removed entirely, as if I had never typed it. That was the first time I understood the system wasn't just hiding information. It was actively rewriting interaction history, and I was inside its correction range. The next escalation happened gradually. Packages started appearing in physical space that did not exist in digital records. Empty crates labeled with barcodes that returned no data. Workers placing items into containers that later showed up as never having been opened. I asked another employee about it casually. He laughed, said I was overthinking it. Then, mid-sentence, he stopped, looked at me strangely, and said, "You're new enough that you still notice things." Then he walked away. That phrase stuck with me. New enough to notice things. As if noticing had a time limit. Around the same period, I began noticing the same printed warning being handled differently across departments. Always the same sentence. Always the same paper. But the reactions varied slightly. Some ignored it completely. Some avoided eye contact when it was mentioned. And some, the longer-term employees, reacted with a brief moment of tension before deliberately changing the subject. Like muscle memory. Like a reflex. Eventually, I asked someone directly what happens if you acknowledge Package Zero. The response was immediate. Not verbal. Behavioral. The person stopped speaking mid-sentence, placed their badge face down on the desk, and left the room without another word. That was the closest thing to an answer I ever received. Everything escalated after that. System errors increased. More shipments disappeared into unresolved states. Entire pallets were logged, tracked, and then erased from all internal databases within minutes of arrival. And then I started seeing the phrase in places it shouldn't have been. Printed on internal maintenance schedules. Embedded in error logs. Even briefly flashing on security camera timestamps before being replaced by standard labels. Always the same 3 words. Package Zero active. That's when I stopped thinking of it as a warning. Warnings are passive. This was operational. Something inside the system was doing something. And it had a name only the system was willing to display. The breaking point came during a night audit. I was reviewing archived footage when I saw myself on screen. Standing at a terminal I didn't recognize. The timestamp showed a shift I wasn't scheduled for. In the footage, I was entering a container ID into the system. Bay Zero. Then I paused, looked directly into the camera, and placed something on the desk. A folded sheet of paper. The same warning. The footage ended there. But I had no memory of that shift. None. The system, however, had a full record of it, including a completed performance review attached to my name. Signed. Approved. Filed. That was the moment I stopped being able to trust any distinction between missing time and assigned time. Because the system didn't treat me as missing. It treated me as processed. The final discovery came when I tried to export all records tied to my employee ID. The system responded immediately, not with denial, with classification. A single line, reassignment in progress, Package Zero designation. I didn't finish reading the rest, because my terminal logged me out automatically. And when I tried to log back in, my credentials were no longer valid. Not disabled, not expired, invalid. As if I had never been entered correctly in the first place. I left the facility that night, or I think I did. The drive home is mostly missing. I have fragments, streetlights, the sound of tires over wet asphalt. My hands on the wheel longer than I remember holding them. When I arrived at my apartment, there was already a printed notice on my door. No envelope, just tape. 1 sentence. Please report to Bay Zero for reassignment. I never went back to the facility. At least I don't think I did. But sometimes when I check my phone, I find notifications from the internal system app 1 uninstalled. And every time I open them, they show the same status update. Package received. And my name is no longer attached to it, that I didn't open the app the first few times. I just saw the notification and let it sit there on my lock screen until it faded. But it kept coming back. Different times. Same wording. Package received. No sender. No preview. Just the system banner like it was something normal I was supposed to understand. I stopped sleeping properly after that. Not because of fear at first. More because I kept waking up at the same time every night. 3:40 a.m. The same time I first saw Bay Zero appear on my screen. I tried changing my routine. Going to bed earlier. Later. Leaving the lights on. Leaving them off. It didn't matter. 3:40 still came like a scheduled check-in. And every time, I'd wake up already half aware, like my brain had been running in the background before I returned to it. That's when I started checking my own records. Not the company system anymore. My personal accounts. Banking first. Then email. Then anything tied to identity verification. At first everything looked normal. Then small inconsistencies started appearing. A transaction I didn't remember making, but only one. An email marked read that I was certain I hadn't opened. Then something worse. A duplicate of my ID profile in a government portal. Same name, same number, same everything, except the status field. It didn't say active. It didn't say inactive either. It said, pending assignment. I stared at that screen for a long time, because that phrase didn't belong there. Not in a civilian system. That was internal language, logistics language, warehouse language, assignment language. That night, I tried calling HR. The number rang once and connected instantly. No menu, no hold music, just silence. Then a voice. Calm, familiar in a way that made my stomach tighten because I couldn't place it. You are no longer on record at this facility. I asked who I was speaking to. The voice paused like it was checking something, then said, you already know the answer to that. And the line disconnected. After that, things started appearing physically, not just digitally. At first it was small, a duplicate ID badge on my kitchen counter. Same photo, same name, but the barcode wouldn't scan on my phone. Then a printed schedule slipped under my door. Not for the logistics hub. For me, it listed shifts I never agreed to, times I couldn't verify, locations that didn't correspond to any building I knew. And at the bottom, always the same classification line. Assignment, 0 processing continuation. I stopped going out during the day, not because I was hiding from anything specific, more because I started noticing patterns in people's behavior around me. Cashiers pausing slightly before giving me receipts. Security guards looking at me too long, then looking away too quickly. Strangers repeating phrases I had heard at work. You're still early enough to notice. That one happened twice in different places. Different people. Same sentence. I started testing it. I went to a grocery store across town and asked the clerk for a receipt twice in a row. The second time, she looked at me and said, very quietly, you shouldn't be repeating inputs like that. Then she handed me the receipt with both hands, like it was something fragile. That was the moment I realized it wasn't contained to the facility anymore. It wasn't even contained to the system. It was spreading through procedural behavior, through repetition, through compliance. Anything structured enough to process information seemed vulnerable to it. I went back through my old notes. Everything I had written about missing shipments, Bay Zero, Package 0. Half of it was gone. Not deleted, just absent. Entire pages missing from my notebook. My handwriting cutting off mid-sentence like I had stopped writing without realizing it. And the worst part was I couldn't remember what had been on those pages. My mind refused to reconstruct it. Like there was a boundary I couldn't cross backward. One night, I found myself outside the logistics hub again. I don't remember deciding to go. I just remember standing across the street from it. The building looked different at night. Less like a workplace, more like a sealed system. Every window lit in a uniform pattern. Every loading bay synchronized. Even the noise felt regulated. I stood there for maybe 10 minutes before someone approached me from behind. A security officer, or someone dressed like one. He didn't ask what I was doing. He just said, you're not scheduled for exterior observation. I turned to ask how he knew that, but he was already holding a printout. My name at the top. Below it, a line I hadn't seen before. External awareness deviation detected. I asked him what that meant. He didn't answer. Instead, he handed me the sheet I had been missing. Not the warning from onboarding. A different one. Longer. Faded at the edges like it had been reprinted too many times. At the top, in bold text, "Do not acknowledge package 0." Below it, there was handwriting. Not printed. Real ink. It said, "If you're reading this outside assigned processing, you're already unclassified." I asked who wrote it. The officer finally looked at me directly. And for the first time, I saw uncertainty in someone from that place. Not fear, not confusion, something worse. Recognition without explanation. He said, "Every version of this gets sent back eventually." I didn't understand. He pointed at the building, even the warnings. Then he added something quieter, especially the warnings. And then he walked away before I could ask anything else. I didn't go back inside, but I didn't leave either. Because when I tried to step away from the building, my phone vibrated again. New notification. Same system. Same banner. Package received. But this time there was a change. The identifier field had filled in. It showed a label. My name. And underneath it, status. Ready for reclassification. I stood there longer than I should have. Watching the building. Waiting for something to confirm I was still separate from it. Nothing did. I went home eventually, though I don't remember the route clearly. And when I got there, my front door was slightly open. Inside, everything looked normal, until I saw my desk. On it was a single folded sheet of paper. No envelope. No explanation. Just the same sentence I'd seen on day 1. Do not acknowledge package 0 under any circumstances. But this time, the paper was different. It had my handwriting on the back, and I don't remember writing it. It said only one thing. Stop trying to remember what you already processed. I haven't opened the app again. Not because I think it will help, but because I noticed something in the last notification before I turned my phone off. The status line had updated while I was looking at it. It didn't say package received anymore. It said package acknowledged. And I don't know exactly what happened after that point, but I know it's still not over that I told myself I wasn't going to open anything else. Not the app, not the emails, not the system messages that kept appearing in places they shouldn't exist. Over. But avoidance only works when a thing you're avoiding stays in one place. It didn't. The next morning, my apartment door was locked from the inside, just like I always left it, except the chain lock had been removed. Not broken, not forced, just gone. The screws were still in the wood. The metal plate was still aligned, but the chain itself wasn't there, as if it had never been installed at all. I stood in front of it for a while, trying to reconstruct whether I had even used it recently. That was the first moment I realized my memory wasn't just unreliable anymore. It was negotiable, like it could be edited after the fact without my participation. On the kitchen table, there was something new. Not paper this time. A badge. My old employee badge from the logistics hub. Except I hadn't seen it since the day I left. The photo on it was wrong. Not because it wasn't me. Because it was me at the wrong time. Same face, same posture, but the expression looked slightly delayed, like the image had been captured a fraction of a second after I'd already stopped reacting. Under the photo, the classification field had changed. It no longer said my name. It just read 0. I dropped it immediately. Not out of fear exactly. More like instinctive rejection. Like touching it for too long would make it correct something in me. I didn't go to work. I didn't have work anymore, technically. At least not according to any system I could access. But around noon, I got a call. Not from HR. Not from a number I recognized. It came through as unknown facility line. I almost didn't answer, but something about the timing felt deliberate, as if ignoring it wouldn't make it stop, only postpone the interaction. When I picked up, there was no greeting, just a short pause, then a voice I remembered from training. Not the supervisor, not HR, the technician who had warned me not to say certain things out loud. He spoke like we were continuing a conversation I had forgotten in the middle of. You're not supposed to be outside classification. I told him I didn't know what that meant. He sighed, not impatient, tired. That's the problem, he said. You still think it needs to mean something you understand. I asked him what was happening to me. There was a longer pause this time. When he spoke again, his voice had dropped slightly. Package 0 isn't an item, he said. It's what happens when the system can't decide what something is supposed to be anymore. I remember sitting down without realizing it, because that sentence didn't feel like information. It felt like confirmation of something already underway. I asked him why I was being classified. He corrected me immediately. "You're not being classified," he said. "You're being resolved." That word stayed in my head long after the call ended. Resolved. Not removed. Not erased. Resolved. Like an error state corrected by forcing it into a final condition. That night, I tried something I probably shouldn't have. I went outside, not to the logistics hub, just outside, to see if anything still behaved normally when I wasn't inside my apartment's closed loop. The street was quiet in a way that felt staged. No wind, no distant traffic variation. Even the usual stray sounds from neighboring buildings seemed reduced to a minimum acceptable level. Like background noise had been tuned down across the entire block. I walked toward the nearest convenience store. It was open, lights on, shelves stocked, clerk behind the counter scrolling on his phone. Everything normal at a glance. Until I entered. The clerk looked up immediately. Not surprised, not interested, just aware. He didn't greet me. Instead, he said, "You're out of sequence." I stopped walking. He repeated it, softer this time. "You're out of sequence." I asked him what he meant. He pointed behind me, at the door. Through the glass, I could see the street I had just walked down. But something was wrong with it. Not visibly altered in structure, but in timing. People were moving slightly out of sync. A pedestrian stepping into a motion they hadn't yet started. A car rolling forward without the implied acceleration preceding it. Like reality was replaying itself incorrectly in fragments. I turned back to the clerk. He looked almost apologetic. "You're overlapping," he said. "You shouldn't be visible in two states at once." I told him I didn't understand. He nodded like that was expected. Then he said something I wasn't prepared for. "No one does it first. That's why the warning exists." That was the first time someone had connected the sentence to me directly, without hesitation. I asked him what warning he meant. He reached under the counter and placed something on top. A folded sheet of paper. Same size, same shape, same sentence, but older, faded, handled too many times. "Do not acknowledge package 0 under any circumstances." I told him I'd seen it before. He nodded, then said, "Everyone sees it before they stop being able to explain it." I asked him what happens after that. He looked at me for a long moment, then said, "They become part of handling." I didn't ask what handling meant, because I already knew I wasn't going to like the answer. When I left the store, the street had corrected itself. Or maybe I had. It's hard to tell which direction the change went. But the inconsistency was gone. Everything was back in place, except for one detail. A man standing across the road, watching me. He wasn't doing anything unusual, just standing. But I recognized him immediately. Not personally, structurally. He looked like me in the logistics footage. The version of me that had been sitting at a terminal I didn't remember using. He raised his hand slightly. Not a wave. More like acknowledgement of confirmation. Then he turned and walked away. I didn't follow him, because I realized something important in that moment. I wasn't being pursued. I was being referenced, like a file opened in multiple locations at once. When I got back to my apartment, my front door was closed again, chain reattached, perfectly aligned, as if nothing had ever been removed. Inside, my desk was empty, except for one thing, a printed system page, not folded this time, flat, official, stamped at the top, finalization notice. Underneath, a single line, package acknowledged successfully, proceeding with integration. And below that, a field labeled, assign location. It was filled in, not with an address, not with coordinates, with something simpler, anywhere accessed. That's when I understood the direction this was going. It wasn't relocating me. It was defining me as transferable, something that could exist wherever the system needed it to be unresolved. My phone lit up one last time while I was reading it. No notification sound, just the screen turning on by itself. The message was short. Stop attempting to isolate your instance. And for the first time, I noticed something I hadn't before. The wording wasn't threatening. It wasn't even instructive. It was corrective, like I was a process being asked to stop resisting optimization. I set the phone down, and it stayed on, displaying my status. Not as a name, not as a profile, just a single line. Package 0, active. I don't know exactly what happens next, but I know it's not something I can step away from anymore. Because the last thing I remember clearly is realizing the warning was never meant to protect me from Package 0. It was meant to delay the moment I understood I was already inside it. And if you've heard it before, if you've seen that sentence anywhere at all, then you already are too. I don't know exactly what happened, but I know it's still not over.